Hello, my name is Doris Aja-Eke. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at DCU Business School and DCU Anti-Corruption Research Center. Today I'll be talking about corruption, sextortion, and gender inequality. So the standard definition of corruption is the abuse of power for private gain, and studies have shown that corruption is generally bad for the society. It enhances political instability, it enhances infant mortality, and it undermines trust within individuals and institutions. So generally, corruption undermines the strength of an institution, corruption undermines development, and corruption generally affects nation building. So we're going to be moving into a distinct type of corruption. And this type of corruption we're going to be talking about is something called sextortion. Sextortion is generally a sexual form of corruption. And sextortion was first recognized by the International Association of Women Judges in 2012. And they defined corruption as they define sextortion as the abuse of power to obtain a sexual benefit or advantage. And when you look at this and comparing it with the standard definition of corruption, which is the abuse of power for private gain, you find that the private gain for sextortion is sexual benefit, is a sexual advantage. Most times we usually have issues differentiating corruption from sextortion or differentiating sextortion from corruption and sexual harassment. And like you can see in this Venn diagram here, you can see sextortion in the middle, corruption at the left, sexual harassment at the right. So the thing about sexual harassment is that you are dealing with lack of consent. So it is clear that you are dealing with a sexual abuse. However, with sextortion, in some of the cases, if not most of the cases, the victims usually are willing to partake in the sexual activity or accept, maybe not necessarily willing, but accept to partake in the sexual activity. But the problem here is that it has to do with power imbalance, the imbalance of power. The dynamics of power is different. The person abusing this power generally has an upper hand and is abusing his trusted position of authority to gain a private gain. And this is worse in the sense that this is a sexual gain, and this has more impact on the victims than maybe other kinds of corruption, such as bribery and grand corruption that we may have generally in the society. So, sextortion, one thing I really want everyone to get is that sextortion is a sexual type of corruption. So it's a situation whereby the currency of the transaction is sex, and the person that wants to abuse their power is trying to get a sexual advantage in order to either give the victim some sort of services that they are entitled to, or they have to pass through some bureaucratic processes to get through it, and either making it difficult for the person to get it or not, or in just some sort of exchange. So like I stated earlier, the currency for sextortion is sex in all its forms. And one thing about sextortion also is that we have very limited data. And the reason why we also have limited data is because it's an underreported type of corruption. So most times the victims are faced with the stigma. They are not very enthusiastic about talking about it. Sometimes they're even blamed for it. So it's a kind of a hidden affair. Corruption is generally a hidden affair. People do it behind closed doors, and they don't want to be seen. But sextortion has an additional level of secrecy, kind of attached to it, in the sense that it's sexual in nature. It's usually a social taboo in some places, and due to this has affected the reporting and evidence of sextortion. So now, looking at the stigma sextortion has, this has affected reporting, but excluding that, we also talked about the fact that it's also difficult to place corruption it's also difficult to place sextortion between corruption and sexual harassment. So this also makes us lose some sort of data, in the sense that we do not know where to place it. So some sextortion cases may just be thrown into corruption, while some sextortion cases may be thrown into sexual abuse, and it's difficult to actually quantify the magnitude of sextortion in the country. And this also is being enhanced by the fact that people are not willing to talk about it, and the society as well do not have strong laws or policies to address this particular type of sextortion, especially as well because we do not have data to back this up. So It's a very problematic area. However, there have been recent studies that have been looking into it, and most of them make use of qualitative evidence, especially from sub-Saharan Africa, to show some of the impacts of sextortion in the society. However, while we have very good data from qualitative data, we do not really necessarily have wide scale qualitative data. However, our in our research center, we're trying to work on this, and we're developing, and we've also developed good, robust quantitative and qualitative data on sextortion. And this is also some of the things I'm going to discuss with you in this series. But what does sextortion do? Sextortion enhances gender gap. It enhances gender gap. It enhances gender inequality. It enhances inequality at all forms. And sextortion also predominantly affects women and vulnerable people. And this is the main reason why it also enhances gender gap, in the sense that women are usually of a disadvantage are usually at a disadvantage. And due to this, it affects their integration into the political, social, and economic aspects of the society. So addressing social extortion is going to be one way of enhancing the reduction of different forms of inequality, especially gender inequality. So I'll be moving more into some of the studies we've done on sextortion and some of the things we've done on gender inequality and gender violence. So generally, we started off by looking at major studies on corruption and see the causes of corruption, and to find out if the drivers of corruption are actually the drivers of sextortion as well. So this was more like a starting point for us. So we've seen evidence in previous studies, like I said, that shows evidence and traces of sextortion. So this time around, as a research center, we've gone forward to try to look at some of the major causes of of sextortion. So we started by looking at the causes, the impacts of corruption, or the factors that affect corruption, and see if these factors also affect sextortion. So some of the factors that affect corruption are press freedom. So we found out that when we have, and some of the studies have shown that when we have press freedom, you find out that there's a lower rate of corruption. When there's trade openness, less red trade, there's good ease of doing business, the level of corruption reduces. Likewise, countries that are richer with higher GDP have lower levels of corruption. Countries that are democratic with stronger political institutions, there's also been traces that they have lower levels of corruption. There've also been traces that in society whereby we have women involved in the political setting, women involved in politics, women involved in parliament, women involved in even the economic affairs of the society. This has also shown traces in the reduction of corruption. So it means that when countries lack some of these factors, the higher the tendencies for corruption. So what did we generally do? Um, in our study, you could see it here, our study that was published in Applied Economics letter titled Sextortion and Corruption. We looked at if the drivers of sextortion, of corruption that I listed earlier, actually have an impact on sextortion. And one thing we found was that we did not actually get any significant impact of different different causes of corruption on sextortion. So they were different. So, but one main thing we got was that the higher the level of corruption in a society, the higher the level of sextortion. In other words, why most of the institutional factors that influence corruption do not necessarily have a significant impact on sextortion. The higher the level of corruption in the state, the higher the level of sextortion. In other words, a society that has a high level of corruption is like a breeding ground for a high level of corruption is a breeding ground for sextortion. A recap of the study was that most standard economic and institutional factors that correlate with corruption do not predict sextortion. However, the more corrupt a country is, the higher the chances of sextortion. And this is also usually intensified by the fact that there is more like a corrupt network within most corrupt systems, and these corrupt networks are usually dominated by men. In other words, it is women are usually victims of this corrupt network, these corrupt institutions that are dominated by men. And in the same study as well, we also looked at the impact of corruption on the perception of sextortion. We also now found out that the higher the rate of corruption, the less likely the people believe that sextortion is an issue or sextortion actually occurs in their society. So what does this mean? This means that people that this we've talked about the fact that the higher the level of corruption, the higher the rates of sextortion. However, it is saddening to know that these corrupt countries are grossly unaware of the fact that sextortion is an issue in their country. So it's more of a situation whereby it becomes a norm, or it becomes so institutionalized that people are no longer aware that this is actually a problem, and that has been shown in our previous slide. In addition to this, at the center, the Anti-Corruption Research Center, we also carried out further studies on the impact of sextortion on female entrepreneurs. So what we did was to make use of data from the make use of data from Transparency International, Global Corruption Barometer, and data from Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, where we kind of merged the data together, and we found that sextortion reduces early stage entrepreneurial activities. However, sextortion only has an impact on female entrepreneurs, but do not have any significant impact on male entrepreneurs. This clearly shows that sextortion negatively impacts women, and not just women. In this particular case, it impacts the entrepreneurial activities of women, the early stage entrepreneurial activities of women. So, what we've been discussing before, sextortion affects vulnerable people. It disproportionately affects women, as has been shown in this study. But there was also something very interesting about the finding as well. The finding also shows that sextortion affects necessity-based entrepreneurs. Sorry, sextortion affects opportunity-based entrepreneurs, but has no impact on necessity-based entrepreneurs. So what does this mean? So when we looked at the data deeper, the entrepreneurs were grouped into two. The opportunity-based entrepreneurs, these are entrepreneurs that go into entrepreneurship because they want to go into it, they have the resources, they have the knowledge, they have the opportunity to go into the particular area of business they want to go into. However, necessity-based entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that start up business because they have no option. So these people are the more vulnerable people. So why sextortion generally reduces entrepreneurial activities? For the most vulnerable people, that means the necessity-based entrepreneurs, they are subject to sextortion. So they go ahead with their business under being subject to sextortion because they generally have no option. However, opportunity-based entrepreneurs would kind of have an option and could decide. These people are the less vulnerable women that can decide to pull out of the business. So this is generally all shades of wrongs. For instance, for the opportunity-based entrepreneur, you'll find that when they pull out, it generally affects the society, it affects economic growth, it affects innovation, it affects innovation from women. However, on the other side, when necessity-based entrepreneurs are subject to sextortion, you find that furthermore enhances gender gaps. It also makes these women victims over and over again, and it also means that more women and vulnerable people are subject to sextortion. So the first two papers that we did on sextortion made use of quantitative data. Like I said earlier, it made use of quantitative data from Transparency International Global Corruption Barometer. And for the second paper as well, it also makes use of an additional data, that is the Global Corruption Barometer. However, we decided to also move forward, like I stated at the beginning of this lecture, that at this year Anti-Corruption Research Center, we are trying to enhance robust data, robust quantitative and qualitative data to better study, understand, and understand sextortion and to provide solutions for sextortion. So due to this, we decided to carry out a focus group among female entrepreneurs, early stage or generally female entrepreneurs in Burkina Faso, to see the impacts of sextortion on female entrepreneurs and to see how they protect themselves. And we also got general patterns. We found out that sextortion, once again, predominantly affects women. It is rampant in the society, and it is usually enhanced in the civil service where there is physical contact. So we found out that where there is physical contact, this enhances sextortion. So a situation whereby people have to go physically to carry out um, um, file management, data processing, or to just get relevant information. So this physical and direct contact of people, of female entrepreneurs in this case, with the civil servants enhances sextortion. So one of the main aims in these our paper in this study is to promote e-government. So in the process of promoting e-government and a contactless system whereby people kind of submit forms, submit documents online without necessarily coming face to face with civil servants, this will enhance the reduction of sextortion. But this comes down to what we've generally been talking about, that sextortion predominantly affects women, it affects vulnerable people, it enhances gender inequality, it enhances the gap within the society, and it is a deadly form of corruption that we need to be aware of. So, in this same study in Burkina Faso, these are some of the things the women are talking about. And it's disheartening to see how bad sextortion affects women and how bad sextortion affects female entrepreneurs. So this is just some samples and some of the extracts from what the participants in Burkina Faso said. So looking at this, the one at the left, it says the demand for sexual favors is becoming more and more frequent in the field of women's entrepreneurship because the number of women who want to become entrepreneurs is increasing all the time. As a result, some men wanting to take advantage of them make sexual advances to certain women in exchange for accepting their files or offering them certain contracts. So you see, whereby someone abuses their power in exchange for sexual advantage here. So in this case, in order for them to accept their documents, in order for them to accept their files, even to give them contracts, they have to demand sexual favors, which women have to accept for them to carry out the activities for them. Another person stated that civil servants take advantage of moments of weakness, situation whereby they know the woman has no choice but accept their proposal. So in this situation, you find out that they are capitalizing on vulnerable people. And in this case, most of them are women, so they're capitalizing on the vulnerability of their victims and using it to demand sexual favors, using it to abuse their power for sexual benefits. And someone else says they do not even care about the pain this may cause these women. So it also means that sextortion is also causing some sort of different types of trauma. And there have also been studies that show this, that sextortion causes different kinds of trauma. It leads to unwanted pregnancies. It leads to sexually transmitted diseases, STDs, and STIs. So sextortion has a very negative impact on the society. And this other person also said living condition can also contribute to the situation. So once again, we see how vulnerability is playing a role. This is the case for a woman who is an orphan, who wants to start her own business, but has no one to help her. Once again, we've seen the person is vulnerable, the person do not have the finances, the person do not have the means to start their business. And due to this, civil servants kind of capitalize on this vulnerability. To moving forward, it says when she turns to a civil servant to explain her situation and to demand for his help, he demands sexual favors before helping her. And this person has no choice than to accept sexual favors. So this is giving us a practical example of the impact of sextortion on female entrepreneurs. And not just female entrepreneurs, also the impact of sextortion on women generally, because sextortion has been shown to exist, have been traces of sextortion in other sectors as well. For instance, in the educational sectors, sex for grade, which has been an issue in some countries and some institutions. So in conclusion, generally, we will need more data on sextortion. We need more data on sextortion, more qualitative data, more quantitative data. We need more reports. We need people to report sextortion cases. We need to work on this. And while we have evidence of qualitative evidence for sub-Saharan Africa, the current data on Transparency International on sextortion do not include sub-Saharan Africa. So that means we also need more quantitative evidence of sextortion for sub-Saharan Africa, which has been predominantly used as evidence of for evidence of sextortion in the society. So in addition to this, we also need adequate anti-corruption and anti-sextortion law. So basically, we need specific laws that address sextortion. I want a situation whereby this law targets the corporate targets the person demanding for sextortion as opposed to the victim. This way, people will be more open to discuss sextortion. We also need more research on sextortion across other sectors. We need discussions of sextortion in the educational sector, discussion of sextortion in the media, in the popular section. So they've also been traces that sextortion exists in this area. So we need detailed studies of sextortion across various sectors. This would also help us to push for better laws and better policies against sextortion. And we also need to make deliberate efforts to identify sextortion. So remember I said that most times the problem with sextortion is that it's usually an intersection between corruption and sexual violence. So we need to make deliberate effort to identify and differentiate sextortion from other types of sexual violence. I hope you enjoyed the section. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, please contact us at DCU Business School or DCU Anti-Corruption Research Center. The description will be down below the description section. Thank you. Bye.